In the maze of the city's subway system, most people saw right through Ray Simmons, a shadow against tiled walls, a human fixture ignored like broken lights. But Ray saw everything, every pattern, every face, every subtle wrongness that others missed. When 10-year-old Noah Chen vanished from Platform 6, leaving behind nothing but confused security footage, the city barely blinked. Just another missing kid poster yellowing on a bulletin board. Until exactly 1 month later, when Ray appeared at the Chen family's apartment door, clutching Noah's blue backpack with the lightning bolt. He unleashed a storm that would expose what lurked beneath the city's surface. Before we dive into this chilling story, I'm curious, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night. Noah Chen stood on the subway platform, fingers tracing the lightning bolt on his bright blue backpack. Around him, adults rushed by in a blur of coats and distraction, their eyes sliding past him like raindrops on glass. He was used to being invisible, not completely, but the kind of invisible that happens when you're quiet and follow rules and don't cause trouble. His mother had finally agreed he could ride the subway alone from his special advanced school back to their apartment. "You're 10 now," she'd said, worry lines deepening around her eyes. But straight home, Noah, no stops. Every day for 3 weeks, the same routine. Board at Westlake Station, 4 stops. Exit at Pinehurst, walk 2 blocks home. The subway became a place of fascination for him. The rhythm of the trains, the predictable patterns of commuters, the exact minute 27 seconds between stations 3 and 4. Noah noticed things others missed, like the man in the corner of the platform, the one with tangled gray hair and layers of stained clothes who talked to himself. Adults pretended not to see him, creating a bubble of empty space around him. But Noah saw how the man's eyes tracked movements, noticed patterns, wrote in a tattered notebook, not random scribbles, but careful, precise notations. Ray Simmons hadn't always lived in the subway tunnels. Once he had a degree in meteorology, an apartment overlooking the park, a girlfriend who loved his passion for weather systems. Then the voices started, whispering about patterns only he could see. After losing his job, his home, and eventually his grip on what others called reality, the subway became his sanctuary. Underground, the voices quieted. Here he could track the human weather systems, the flows of people, the pressure systems of rush hours, the cold fronts of late-night emptiness. No one noticed Ray anymore. He'd become part of the infrastructure, just another broken thing the city hadn't fixed. But Ray noticed everything. He saw how the transit cops always skipped the north stairwell during sweeps, how the maintenance worker with the gold watch spent too much time watching children, how certain kids disappeared from his carefully tracked patterns, never to return. One Tuesday afternoon, Ray looked up from his notebook and locked eyes with Noah. The boy didn't look away like adults did. Instead, Noah tilted his head, curious about what the man was writing. Ray quickly turned the page, but something passed between them. A moment of seeing and being seen. Neither knew this brief connection would soon be all that stood between Noah and oblivion. The day Noah vanished started like any other. He stood on Platform 6, backpack snug against his shoulders, waiting for the 3:47 train. The blue line always ran 4 minutes late on Thursdays, a pattern Noah had noted in his weather journal, where he tracked everything from actual rainfall to the human weather of subway crowds. Ray was there too, huddled on his bench, watching. He noticed the man immediately, clean-shaven charcoal overcoat, expensive shoes, out of place on this platform at this hour. The man checked his phone repeatedly, scanning the crowd with purpose, not impatience. When Noah dropped his weather journal, pages fluttering across the concrete, the man moved, not to help, but to watch. He picked up one page, studied it, then approached Noah with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You like weather patterns? The man crouched to Noah's level. I work with the city meteorology department. These are impressive notes. Ray shifted, uncomfortable heat crawling up his spine. The voices in his head grew louder, a warning system blaring. This wasn't right. The man's shoes were Italian leather, not the practical footwear of someone who chased storms. His watch, too expensive for a government salary. And meteorologists didn't wear that cologne, the kind that smelled like money and secrets. Noah, usually cautious around strangers, seemed to relax. You really work with weather systems? I sure do. In fact, we have a special program for gifted kids like you. There's an open house today just 2 stops from here. Ray stood. The voices screaming now. He needed to intervene. But what could he say? Who would believe the crazy homeless man over the well-dressed professional? He approached anyway. Train's coming, Ray mumbled, his words slurred from medication he'd stopped taking weeks ago. Big storm. Big storm coming. The man in the overcoat barely glanced at him. Move along, buddy. The arriving train drowned Ray's next words. He watched helplessly as the man guided Noah toward the doors, hand resting too proprietarily on the boy's shoulder. Noah hesitated, looked back, not at Ray, but at the platform. Had he forgotten something? The doors closed before Ray could move. 2 hours later, Mrs. Yang called the police. Noah hadn't come home. The subway security footage showed him on platform 6, then boarding a train, but the camera angle missed who boarded with him. Noah never exited at his usual stop. By morning, Noah's face plastered the neighborhood, a school photo showing serious eyes beneath carefully combed hair. The blue backpack with its lightning bolt became a focal point of the search. Last seen wearing. The police questioned regular commuters. They reviewed footage. They checked Noah's computer and found nothing unusual for a bright 10-year-old obsessed with weather and comic book heroes. They interviewed his teachers, who described a quiet, brilliant child who kept to himself. No one thought to ask Ray. To most, he was invisible. Just another muttering homeless man who rambled about storms and collectors and children disappearing like raindrops in the ocean. Officer Diaz did notice Ray's agitation, the way he paced platform 6, arguing with voices only he could hear. You see that kid? The one that's missing? Diaz asked, more out of boredom than hope. Ray froze, eyes suddenly clear. They took him, the collectors. They know which ones to take. Collectors? Who are they? People who look like people but aren't. People you trust. Uniforms and suits and smiles with nothing behind them. Ray's lucidity slipped. They need the special ones, the ones who see patterns. Diaz reported the exchange, filed under non-credible witness statements. His supervisor barely glanced at it. That guy? The schizo who lives in the tunnels? He probably thinks aliens took the kid. Days passed. The search continued. Mrs. Young's eyes grew hollow as hope dimmed, and Ray watched the platforms with renewed purpose, clutching his weather journal, waiting for the collectors to return. Nobody noticed when Ray himself disappeared from his usual bench on day 7. Nobody except the shadows who had begun tracking him too. Day 8 of Noah's disappearance dawned cold and hopeless. Mrs. Yang hadn't slept in 36 hours, surviving on convenience store coffee and diminishing hope. The police investigation had stalled. Detective Morgan's words hung in the air of her apartment like a toxic cloud. Most runaways return home within the first week. He didn't run away, Mrs. Yang had insisted, voice cracking. Noah doesn't break patterns. Never. But without evidence of abduction, the case was sliding from urgent to routine. Missing kid. Probably troubled. Perhaps a parent should have been more attentive. Meanwhile, Ray Simmons crawled through maintenance tunnels beneath the city, following whispers and shadows. During his 7 years in the subway system, he'd mapped every forgotten corridor, every maintenance access point. The voices in his head, usually a chaotic symphony, had focused to a single clear note. Find the boy. In a drainage tunnel connecting Westlake and Pinehurst stations, something blue caught Ray's eye, tucked behind a junction box. Noah's backpack lightning bolt still bright against the grime. Ray's hands trembled as he unzipped it. Inside Noah's comics, carefully protected in plastic sleeves, his weather journal. School ID card with serious eyes staring from a freshly printed photo. Ray clutched the backpack to his chest. The boy had been here, in these forgotten passages where only maintenance workers and the homeless traveled. This wasn't a runaway situation. This was something worse. He emptied the backpack, creating space for new purpose. If no one would believe what he said, he would collect proof. No matter how fractured his mind, Ray could still document patterns, evidence, truth. In the station above, Mrs. Yang placed another poster over a faded concert advertisement. Noah's face, serious and small, stared back at her. A passerby glanced, mouth so sad, and continued walking. The missing blended into background noise in a city that moved too fast to notice. 12 hours later, Ray positioned himself near Platform 4, a different station, same time of day. Same well-dressed man appeared, checking his watch. Ray photographed him with a discarded phone he'd found, battery barely holding charge. The man approached another child, a girl, around 12, also alone. Same opener, complimenting her artwork, mentioning a special program. Ray followed them this time, keeping to shadows. They exited at Henderson Station, proceeded to a service door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The man waved a key card, guided the girl inside. Ray pressed his ear to the door, heard footsteps descending, then silence. Hours later, Ray tried approaching a transit officer. "Sir, children are disappearing," he began, words tumbling out too fast. "There's a man in a charcoal coat, Italian shoes, taking them through maintenance doors. I have pictures." He held up the dying phone. The officer sighed. "Sir, you can't be down here harassing passengers with accusations." "I have evidence." Ray held up Noah's backpack. The officer's expression changed instantly. "Where did you get that? That matches the description of the missing Chen boy's backpack." Ray realized his mistake too late. Now he looked like a kidnapper, not a witness. He bolted, diving into a crowd of commuters, the backpack clutched to his chest. That night, Ray huddled in his hidden alcove behind the Pinehurst Station bathroom, thumbing through Noah's comics. Superheroes and villains, so easy to tell apart with their costumes and clear motivations. Not like real monsters who wore expensive shoes and official ID badges. In the second comic, something slipped out, a hand-drawn map. Ray stared at it, brain shifting through fog. Noah had been mapping the subway too, but with annotations Ray didn't understand. Numbers, arrows, notes about cold spots, and camera blinds. Noah hadn't been randomly chosen. He'd seen patterns too, dangerous ones. As Ray studied the map, a maintenance worker unlocked a service door 30 feet away, the same door he'd seen the well-dressed man use. The worker glanced around furtively before entering. Ray stuffed the comics back into the backpack and crept forward. Before the door closed, he glimpsed a corridor illuminated by fluorescent lights, and on the wall, an official transit authority seal beside another logo he didn't recognize. Something about Youth Development Initiative. The next morning, Detective Morgan received a new report. A homeless man had been spotted carrying a backpack matching Noah Chen's. The description matched known schizophrenic Raymond Simmons, former meteorologist, current subway resident. The investigation shifted. Ray became the prime suspect. But Officer Gutierrez from Transit Authority remembered Ray differently. "He's harmless, talks about weather systems and patterns. Been here for years." "He's been spotted following children," Morgan countered. "Or watching out for them," Gutierrez said quietly. Last month he reported a man filming kids at the south entrance. We ignored him, but he was right. Morgan added a note to the file, but didn't change the alert. It was easier to blame the obvious suspect, the mentally ill man with no alibi and a history of erratic behavior, than to consider alternatives. Deep in the tunnels, Ray added to his collection of evidence in the blue backpack times, locations, photos of 4 different well-dressed collectors, a maintenance worker's dropped ID badge. His weather journal now tracked human movements, calculating patterns that revealed something organized and terrible beneath the city's surface. When he finally fell asleep, Ray clutched the backpack like a lifeline, unaware that 3 separate groups were now hunting for him: the police, the transit authority, security, and something far worse that had noticed his noticing. 14 days after Noah vanished, Ray's investigation had transformed the blue backpack into an evidence vault. Every pocket bulged with documented patterns, photographs, sketches of collectors, times and locations, snippets of overheard conversations. His fractured mind, often a liability, became an asset. He could spot connections others would dismiss as coincidence. The maintenance tunnels told a story. Service doors that should have been locked stood accessible with the right key card. Camera systems experienced convenient maintenance periods during specific hours. And always well-dressed men and women with official-looking badges shepherding children who looked just slightly too compliant. Ray called them the collectors in his notes. They operated in plain sight, using the city's infrastructure against itself. The subway, a maze of blind spots and background noise, provided perfect camouflage. On day 15, Ray witnessed something that crystallized his suspicions. Hiding behind a ventilation grate, he observed a collector leading 2 children through a maintenance area. As they passed beneath a bare bulb, Ray saw their faces blank, unfocused, as if drugged or hypnotized. The collector spoke into a radio, "Package secure, proceed to extraction point Delta." Ray documented everything in trembling handwriting. They're not just taking loners or runaways. They choose specific kids. Noah's weather patterns. The girl from Platform 4 with advanced math books. The boy yesterday carrying engineering sketches. They want the smart ones, the ones who see. His hand shook so badly he tore the page. The voices in his head screamed contradictory warnings. Some paranoid fragment of his mind insisted this was government mind control, alien abduction, supernatural harvest. But the rational meteorologist, still alive inside him, recognized human monsters when he saw them. Meanwhile, the official investigation into Noah's disappearance had stalled. Mrs. Yang's apartment became a shrine to her missing son. Weather maps and comics preserved exactly as he'd left them, as if their perfect order might somehow summon him home. When Detective Morgan suggested they discuss adjusting to a new normal, Mrs. Yang threw him out. "My son is alive," she insisted. Noah follows patterns. Something disrupted his pattern. That night, after 70 hours without sleep, Ray made his breakthrough. Following a maintenance worker who had accessed a restricted area, he discovered a loading dock hidden beneath Henderson Station. 3 unmarked vans waited while collectors transferred children, 6 of them moving with that same drugged compliance. Ray recognized Noah instantly. Despite the boy's disheveled appearance, his blue jacket was gone, replaced with gray sweats that matched the other children's. They all wore numbered badges around their necks. Noah's eyes stared vacantly as a handler guided him toward the middle van. Ray's heart hammered against his ribs. He needed to intervene, but he was outnumbered and unarmed. Direct confrontation would fail. Instead, he took photos, hands shaking so badly most came out blurred, but 3 were clear enough, proof of Noah, alive, being transported. As the vans prepared to leave, Ray made a desperate decision. He sprinted from his hiding place during a moment when the handlers were distracted, managed to slip a weather comic into Noah's pocket, and whispered, "I see you. Hold on." Then he vanished back into the darkness before security could respond to the disturbance. Noah's eyes flickered, just briefly, with recognition. Back in his tunnel sanctuary, Ray examined the photos. In the background of one image, partially visible, a sign reading Youth Cognitive Research Initiative, Transport Division. Another showed a handler's badge with a corporate logo, the same one he'd spotted earlier alongside the Transit Authority seal. He needed to get this information to someone who could help. But who would believe him? His appearance alone would discredit his evidence. The police already suspected him of involvement in Noah's disappearance, and the Transit Authority seemed compromised. Meanwhile, Officer Ortiz had begun noticing anomalies in the subway security protocols. Assigned to review footage for signs of Ray Simmons, he instead found odd patterns of camera outages. Maintenance doors accessing restricted areas showed usage at 3 a.m. when no maintenance was scheduled. His supervisor dismissed his concerns. "Focus on finding the homeless guy with the backpack," he was told. "Leave security issues to IT." But Ortiz couldn't shake the feeling something larger was happening. He began documenting the anomalies in his personal notebook, creating a map of camera blind spots that formed a suspicious pattern throughout the system. On day 17, Ray followed a maintenance worker through a service door, emerging in an unfamiliar section of tunnels. The corridors were cleaner here, with proper lighting and fresh paint, a stark contrast to the neglected infrastructure elsewhere. Signs warned, "Restricted area. Research personnel only." Ray photographed everything, moving silently through corridors until voices forced him to hide inside a supply closet. Through the slats in the door, he watched two researchers in lab coats discuss cognitive enhancement protocols and exceptional subject acquisition. "The Chen boy shows remarkable pattern recognition," one said. "His weather modeling could revolutionize our predictive algorithms." "Any complications with the family?" asked the other. "None. Single mother. Limited resources. Police investigation is focusing on a homeless man seen with the backpack. Perfect diversion." Ray bit his knuckles until they bled, forcing himself to remain silent. He was being framed while Noah was being held in some kind of research facility. After the researchers left, Ray explored further, discovering a computer terminal momentarily left unlocked. His technical skills were years outdated, but he managed to access basic information, enough to confirm his worst fears. The Youth Cognitive Research Initiative was collecting gifted children for some kind of experimental program. The documentation used euphemisms like temporary guardianship and educational intervention. But the security protocols told the real story. These were prisoners, not students. Ray downloaded what files he could onto a USB drive he'd found discarded months ago, then fled when an alarm suddenly blared. He barely escaped, losing his jacket to a security guard, but keeping the precious backpack safe. By day 20, Ray's mental state had deteriorated significantly. Lack of sleep, stress, and reduced access to his medication left him struggling to separate reality from delusion. The evidence in the backpack remained his anchor, tangible proof he wasn't imagining everything. He created a detailed map of the operation, collection points, transport routes, security patterns, and the hidden research facility. His notes grew increasingly frantic, but maintained a coherent core. Years of meteorological training helped him document the human weather system of this criminal organization, pressure points, vulnerabilities, cyclical patterns. Officer Ortiz had begun his own investigation, reviewing historical reports of missing children. He found 23 cases in the past 3 years with disturbing similarities. All gifted children, all last seen near subway stations, all officially classified as runaways, despite parents insisting their children wouldn't leave voluntarily. When Ortiz presented his findings to Detective Morgan, he was brushed off. Kids run away. Parents never want to accept their perfect children would leave. But Morgan's dismissiveness seemed forced. His eyes not meeting Ortiz's, something felt wrong. Later that day, Ortiz spotted Ray darting through Henderson Station. Instead of calling for backup, he followed at a distance, watching as Ray meticulously photographed maintenance doors, security cameras, and staff movements. This didn't look like the behavior of a kidnapper, but rather someone conducting surveillance. As Ortiz closed in, Ray spotted him and fled, disappearing through a maintenance door that should have been locked. Ortiz reported the sighting, but deliberately omitted the door detail. Something wasn't adding up, and he wasn't ready to share his suspicions. On day 25, Ray made his most disturbing discovery yet. Following a series of connected maintenance tunnels, he found himself at a warehouse by the river, miles from where he'd started. Inside, through high windows, he could access only by climbing drainage pipes. He saw children in gray sweats, arranged at workstations. They wore monitoring devices on their wrists and moved with mechanical precision through what appeared to be cognitive tests. He spotted Noah at a weather modeling station, thin fingers manipulating data on a specialized console. Even from a distance, Ray could see the boy's deterioration, weight loss, dark circles under his eyes, a vacancy in his movements that hadn't been there before. As Ray photographed the scene, a security alarm triggered. He barely escaped, sliding down a drainage pipe as guards emerged from the building. In his haste, the backpack caught on a broken pipe, tearing open and spilling some of his evidence into the river. He salvaged what he could and fled into the night. That same evening, Mrs. Yang received an anonymous email, "Your son is alive. Youth Cognitive Research Initiative. Not cops." Transit authority involved. Warehouse by North Docks. Evidence coming. She immediately called Detective Morgan, who arrived quickly. Too quickly, she later thought, and dismissed the email as a cruel prank. When she mentioned the specific name of the organization, Morgan's expression changed momentarily before he regained composure. "I'll look into it," he promised, taking the laptop to trace the email. After he left, Mrs. Yang realized he'd taken her only copy of the message. Instinct told her something was wrong. She called Officer Ortiz instead, whose card she'd kept after he'd shown genuine concern during initial interviews. "The detective took my laptop," she explained. "There was an email about Noah, about who has him." "What exactly did it say?" Ortiz asked, voice low. When she mentioned the organization name and warehouse location, Ortiz fell silent for a moment. "I'm coming over," he finally said. "Don't tell anyone else about this." Ray, meanwhile, had made a decision. After 26 days of gathering evidence, running from authorities and tracking the collectors, his mind and body were failing. The voices grew louder, reality harder to grasp. He needed to get Noah's backpack, with all its accumulated evidence, to someone who would act on it. He spent that night organizing everything: photos labeled with dates and locations, maps marked with collection points and transport routes, the USB drive with downloaded files, a detailed journal connecting it all together. He wrote a cover letter explaining the operation as clearly as his fractured mind could manage. Then he looked at Noah's school ID with his home address. It was time to bring the evidence to the one person who would never stop looking: Noah's mother. As dawn broke on day 27, Ray walked openly through the streets for the first time in weeks. The blue backpack with its lightning bolt seemed to glow against the gray morning, a beacon of either hope or final desperation. Unknown to Ray, 3 separate groups tracked his movement through the city: the police, led by an increasingly nervous Detective Morgan, a private security team dispatched from the research facility, and Officer Ortiz, who had begun to unravel a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of city governance. The hammer was about to fall. The only question was who would reach Ray first: those who wanted to silence him, or those who needed to hear his truth. Day 27. The weight of the blue backpack pulled against Ray's shoulders as he navigated morning crowds. His body hunched to avoid recognition. The lightning bolt, once bright, had dulled with grime and rough handling, much like Noah himself in those glimpses Ray had caught at the warehouse. For the first time in years, Ray had attempted to make himself presentable. He'd washed in a public bathroom, combed his tangled hair with fingers, chosen his least stained clothes. The evidence needed to be taken seriously, which meant he needed to appear as credible as possible, despite the voices currently arguing inside his skull. 2 miles from Mrs. Yang's apartment, Ray spotted the unmarked car, black sedan, tinted windows, 2 men watching too intently. His paranoia, often a liability but sometimes survival sharp, triggered alarm bells. He ducked into a convenience store, watching through window advertisements as the sedan slowly cruised past. "They're following you," whispered a voice in his head. The collectors know. For once, Ray didn't dismiss the voice. The collectors had resources, connections in law enforcement. They would be monitoring Mrs. Yang's apartment, expecting someone to try contacting her. Changing course, Ray headed toward the subway. Underground, he could move through maintenance areas, approach from an unexpected direction. The blue line would take him within 3 blocks of the Yang residence. Inside the subway station, Ray froze. Transit officers were conducting identity checks at the turnstiles, something that never happened at this station. Searching for him? He retreated to a corner, trying to think through the fog of fear and medication withdrawal. An announcement echoed through the speakers. "Attention passengers. Security measures have been enhanced today due to a scheduled VIP transport. We apologize for any inconvenience." Ray's mind latched onto the announcement. VIP transport. The research facility moving someone important, or moving the children. Noah? He pulled Noah's maps from the backpack, hands trembling as he traced subway lines, comparing notes with his own observations. If the facility was moving children, they would use the maintenance tunnels connecting Henderson Station to the river warehouse. But why today? Ray's fractured thoughts crystallized around a terrible possibility. They were accelerating their timeline because they knew someone was gathering evidence. Because of him. Meanwhile, Officer Ortiz had arrived at Mrs. Yang's apartment, listening intently as she described the email and Detective Morgan's suspicious reaction. "He's been handling Noah's case from the beginning," Mrs. Yang said, "but something changed after I mentioned that organization name." Ortiz nodded grimly. The Youth Cognitive Research Initiative appears legitimate on paper, educational programs for gifted children funded by corporate donors. But I've found something strange. Their board of directors includes the Transit Authority Commissioner and Deputy Mayor Walsh. Why would city officials be involved in kidnapping? I don't know yet, but I've tracked 23 similar disappearances. All gifted children with specific talents: mathematics, engineering, pattern recognition. Noah's weather modeling would fit the profile. As they spoke, Ortiz's phone buzzed with an alert. Raymond Simmons, spotted entering Westlake Station, carrying the blue backpack. All officers instructed to apprehend. "That's the homeless man they suspect took Noah," Mrs. Yang said, seeing the alert on his screen. "Maybe," Ortiz said carefully. "Or maybe he's the one who sent you that email." Across town, Detective Morgan sat in his car outside the research facility, gripping his steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. The call he'd just received left little room for interpretation. "The situation is being contained," the smooth voice had told him. "Your cooperation has been noted and will be rewarded. Remember, your son's scholarship depends on your continued discretion." Morgan had never meant for things to go this far. When he'd first been approached about redirecting investigations away from certain missing children cases, it had seemed harmless. These were facilities helping gifted kids, not harming them. The persuasive recruiter had shown him glossy brochures of advanced educational opportunities, explaining how sometimes parents couldn't understand their children's needs. His own son's full-ride scholarship to an exclusive private school had seemed like a fortunate coincidence at the time. Now he knew better. He'd seen the security at the warehouse, the monitoring devices, the vacant expressions. These weren't students, they were test subjects. But speaking up would mean losing everything. Career, freedom, his son's future. Back in the subway, Ray had made a critical decision. Direct approach to Mrs. Yang was too dangerous. He needed another way to deliver the evidence. Remembering Noah's comic books, he tore a page from his weather journal and began writing in the meteorological code they both understood, symbols for pressure systems and weather fronts that mapped to letters and words. Noah alive. Warehouse by North Docks. Evidence in backpack. Trust only Ortiz. He didn't know who Ortiz was, but he'd overheard the name connected to Noah's case. Someone Mrs. Yang had mentioned trusting in a conversation Ray had witnessed through a window during his surveillance. Folding the note inside Noah's favorite comic, Ray approached a subway janitor, a man he'd observed for months and believed wasn't connected to the collectors. "Please," Ray said, pressing $20 found in the station into the man's hand. "Take this to this address. Just leave it at the door. It's important. It's about a missing child." The janitor looked skeptical but nodded, pocketing the money and the comic book with its hidden message. As the janitor walked away, Ray felt a moment of hope, quickly shattered by a voice over the loudspeaker. "Attention! Security alert! Station is now in lockdown. All passengers please remain where you are." Transit officers began spreading through the station, speaking into radios, checking faces against phones, looking for him. Ray fled toward a maintenance door, using a stolen keycard to access the tunnels. But inside, he heard voices echoing, security personnel sweeping the areas he'd previously found safe. "They're closing in," whispered the voice in his head. "They'll take you to the warehouse too." For hours, Ray navigated the maintenance maze beneath the city, evading security teams that seemed to anticipate his movements. His mental state deteriorated further, hallucinations blending with reality until he couldn't tell which shadows were real threats and which were manifestations of his illness. The backpack grew impossibly heavy, the evidence inside it his only connection to sanity. If he lost it, no one would believe what he'd seen. Noah and the others would remain trapped in that warehouse laboratory, their brilliant minds harvested for whatever research the initiative conducted. By late afternoon, Ray found himself trapped in a maintenance room as voices approached from both connecting tunnels. No escape route remained. In desperation, he wedged himself into a ventilation shaft, pulling the backpack in after him. Through the grate, he watched as two security teams converged, one in transit authority uniforms, the other in unmarked tactical gear. Their radios crackled with updates. "Subject believed in northeast quadrant," reported one. "Full extraction authorized. Research assets being relocated as precaution." They were moving the children. Today, because of him. As the search teams moved on, Ray's mind raced through possibilities. He couldn't reach Mrs. Yang. Couldn't trust police. The evidence needed protection. An idea formed. Dangerous, possibly delusional, but the only option remaining. If he couldn't bring the evidence to authorities, perhaps he could create a situation where authorities came to the evidence. Create a scene so public that concealment became impossible. He would go directly to Mrs. Yang's apartment, let himself be captured there if necessary. Force a confrontation where the backpack would be opened, the evidence revealed in front of witnesses. As Ray crawled from his hiding place, his phone, stolen months ago, battery perpetually dying, buzzed with an incoming message. Somehow, impossibly, a text had broken through. "This is Noah. They're moving us tonight. North Dock Warehouse. I hacked their system, but they'll notice soon." Ray stared at the screen, voices in his head momentarily silent with shock. Noah was alive, conscious enough to send a message. The boy had found a way to fight back. With renewed purpose, Ray secured the backpack and began moving toward the surface, toward Mrs. Yang's apartment, toward the one chance to save a child who, like him, saw patterns others missed. The final confrontation was coming, and everything depended on who controlled the narrative when the truth finally exploded into the light. Day 27, 5:43 p.m. Mrs. Yang's apartment building rose against the darkening sky, a modest brick structure in a neighborhood where people minded their business and security cameras were more decorative than functional, perfect for someone who wanted to approach unseen. Ray stood across the street, the blue backpack clutched to his chest. Every instinct screamed danger. Two unmarked cars waited at opposite ends of the block. A man in a transit authority jacket, who wasn't a transit worker, watched the main entrance. The collectors had established a perimeter. Officer Ortiz and Mrs. Yang remained inside, reviewing subway maintenance schedules Ortiz had obtained through back channels. The patterns were unmistakable, sections going offline for maintenance precisely when children had disappeared. If they're moving the children tonight, they'll use these tunnels, Ortiz explained, circling routes on a map. We need to... A sharp knock interrupted them. 3 rapid taps, pause, 2 more. Through the peephole, Mrs. Yang saw no one. Ortiz drew his weapon, signaling her to step back. The knocking repeated, same pattern. Police! Open up, came a voice from the hallway. Detective Morgan. Ortiz signaled for silence, pointing to the fire escape window. Something felt wrong. Outside, Ray saw the commotion at the front entrance, police cruisers arriving, officers establishing a perimeter. His window of opportunity was closing. The service entrance at the back of the building remained unguarded. Taking a deep breath, he made his move. Inside, Ortiz and Mrs. Yang were gathering evidence when the service door creaked open. Ray appeared, wild-eyed and trembling, the blue backpack extended like an offering. Noah's alive, he gasped. They're moving him tonight. Everything's in here. Before either could respond, the apartment door burst open. Detective Morgan entered, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 officers. Raymond Simmons, you're under arrest for the kidnapping of Noah Chen, Morgan announced. Drop the backpack and put your hands up. Ray froze, eyes darting between Morgan, Ortiz, and Mrs. Yang. They're corrupt, he whispered. The police, transit authority, city officials all working with the collectors. He's delusional, Morgan told Mrs. Yang. We've been tracking him for weeks. He's obsessed with your son. Ortiz stepped forward, his own weapon still drawn. Before we do anything, I think we should see what's in the backpack. Morgan's expression hardened. That's evidence in an active kidnapping case. It needs to be processed properly. Open it, Mrs. Yang suddenly demanded, her voice cutting through the tension. If my son's kidnapper is standing in my living room, I have the right to see the evidence. A standoff ensued, Morgan refusing to lower his weapon, Ortiz maintaining his position, Ray trembling as he clutched the backpack. The moment stretched, taut, with potential violence. Then Ray's stolen phone buzzed. With shaking hands, he withdrew it, turning the screen toward Mrs. Yang. Another message from Noah. Mom, if you're there, the blue and yellow makes a green key. Remember our secret code?
Mrs. Yang gasped.
The message referenced a private game she and Noah played, combining colors to create coded messages only they understood. This couldn't be faked. Let me see the backpack, she said with newfound authority, stepping toward Ray. Morgan moved to intercept. Mrs. Yang, this man is dangerous. Detective. Stand down, Ortiz ordered. Something's not right here. As the confrontation escalated, Ray made a desperate decision. He tossed the backpack toward Mrs. Yang. It landed at her feet, contents spilling across the floor, photographs, maps, journal entries, the USB drive, and something else. Noah's student ID badge alongside a comprehensive diagram of the warehouse by the North Docks, with one section labeled Primary Research Containment. Morgan lunged for the evidence, but Ortiz blocked him. Mrs. Yang dropped to her knees, frantically examining the photographs. She gasped, holding up a clear image of Noah in gray sweats, working at some kind of computer terminal, a monitoring device on his wrist. "This is from 3 days ago," she whispered, finding the date notation. "He's alive." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ray's evidence wasn't the ravings of a madman, but a meticulously documented investigation. Maps of the subway system showed transport routes. Photographs captured multiple children being moved through maintenance areas. The journal detailed dates, times, and personnel involved in what appeared to be an organized operation. Morgan's radio crackled. "Status update on the Simmons apprehension." Before he could respond, Ortiz moved with sudden decision, disarming the detective in one smooth motion. "Detective Morgan, you're going to tell us exactly what's happening at that warehouse tonight." Morgan's facade crumbled. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. These people, they have reach everywhere. My son's scholarship, my pension, everything depends on me cooperating." "They're moving the children tonight," Ray interjected, momentarily lucid. Noah sent a message. "They're emptying the warehouse because they know someone's onto them." Ortiz made a split-second decision, handcuffing Morgan to a radiator while calling in trusted colleagues from his precinct. "I need officers I can trust," he explained to Mrs. Yang. "This goes beyond a missing persons case." As Ortiz coordinated a response team, Mrs. Yang approached Ray cautiously. "You've been looking for my son all this time?" Ray nodded. The voices in his head momentarily quiet. "Noah sees patterns. Like me. The collectors want people who see patterns." Mrs. Yang picked up Ray's weather journal, recognizing the same notation system Noah used. "You're a meteorologist." "Was," Ray corrected, a flash of his former self breaking through. Their eyes met in understanding, two people connected by a brilliant boy who noticed what others missed. The evidence spread across the floor told a story of corruption, exploitation, and one homeless man's impossible crusade for justice. Outside, sirens approached as Ortiz's trusted officers responded to his call. The final confrontation was coming, not just to rescue Noah, but to expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of city government. The storm Ray had been predicting for weeks was about to break. Night descended on the city as a convoy of unmarked police vehicles approached the North Docks. Officer Ortiz had assembled a team of 8 officers he personally trusted, men and women with no connections to upper management, no unexplained financial windfalls, nothing that suggested compromise. In the lead car, Mrs. Yang clutched the blue backpack, now repacked with the most damning evidence. Beside her, Ray Simmons swayed slightly, his mental state deteriorating as adrenaline and stress overwhelmed his fragile equilibrium. "You should have left me behind," Ray muttered. "I'm a liability." The voices, they're getting louder. "You're the only one who knows the facility layout," Ortiz reminded him from the driver's seat. "And Noah trusts you." Mrs. Yang reached over, her hand finding Ray's. "You saw my son when everyone else looked away. Whatever happens next, thank you for that." Ray's eyes cleared momentarily. "Noah's special. The collectors know it too. That's why they want him." At the warehouse, activity spiked as workers loaded equipment into trucks. Security personnel patrolled the perimeter, weapons visible through binoculars. Ortiz observed men in lab coats supervising the transfer of what appeared to be computer servers. "No sign of children yet," he reported. "They must be keeping them inside until the last moment." Ray studied the warehouse, comparing it to his mental map. "There's a secondary exit, northwest corner. Maintenance tunnel connects to the subway system. They'll move the children that way while everyone watches the trucks." Ortiz divided his team. 4 officers would create a distraction at the main entrance while he led a smaller group through the maintenance tunnel. Mrs. Yang insisted on joining despite objections. "I'm not waiting in the car while my son is in there." No one suggested Ray stay behind. Despite his deteriorating condition, his knowledge was essential, and something in his expression suggested he'd follow regardless of their decision. Inside the warehouse, Noah Chen sat perfectly still as researchers disconnected monitoring equipment. The other children, 27 in total, lined up in the processing area, ready for transport. After weeks of forced compliance through medication and psychological conditioning, Noah had carefully constructed a mask of submission while his mind worked furiously beneath. The system breach he'd managed hadn't gone undetected. The researchers had immediately tightened security, but Noah had accomplished his goal, sending coordinates and a distress signal. Whether anyone received it remained unknown. Dr. Walsh, the project director, reviewed transport protocols with security personnel. Teams Alpha and Beta will escort primary subjects through the maintenance tunnel. Team Charlie maintains visible loading operation as diversion. Any questions? A security officer raised concerns about the police detective who'd stopped responding to check-ins. Walsh dismissed them with a wave. Detective Morgan has been neutralized. Transit Authority has been instructed to keep subway tunnels clear. Proceed as planned. As the first group of children moved toward the northwest exit, Noah noticed something unexpected. The security system display momentarily showed movement in the maintenance tunnel. Someone was coming through their escape route. Using the distraction of transfer preparations, Noah whispered to the girl beside him, Eliza, a mathematics prodigy who'd been there longer than anyone. Be ready, something's happening. Her vacant expression didn't change, but her fingers twitched in acknowledgement. The children had developed subtle communication methods beneath the researchers' observation, imperceptible to adults who saw only compliant test subjects. Outside, Ortiz's distraction team moved into position. On his signal, they approached the main entrance, identifying themselves as police conducting a routine inspection based on reports of suspicious activity. As predicted, security personnel converged on the front entrance, drawing attention away from the maintenance tunnel where Ortiz, Mrs. Yang, Ray, and two officers now approached the secondary exit. Ray led them through the darkness with surprising confidence, his illness momentarily overridden by purpose. The door requires keycard access, he whispered. But the ventilation system has access points large enough to... He stopped abruptly as voices echoed ahead. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. They're already moving the children, Ortiz realized. They pressed against the wall as the first security team approached, leading 6 children in gray uniforms. The children moved in eerie unison, eyes downcast, monitoring bracelets glowing softly on their wrists. Mrs. Yang stifled a gasp, searching each face for Noah. He wasn't among them. The security team passed without noticing them, heading deeper into the tunnel system. Ortiz signaled they should continue toward the warehouse. Noah must still be inside. At the security door, Ray's prediction proved correct. Keycard access required. But the ventilation shaft above provided an alternative entry point. Ortiz helped Ray into the shaft first, followed by Mrs. Yang, while the officers remained to secure their exit route. Inside the ventilation system, Ray crawled with the certainty of someone who'd navigated similar spaces for years. The voices in his head had become a strange advantage, paranoia making him hyper-aware of every sound, every vibration that might signal danger. They reached a grate overlooking the main processing area, just as Noah and the final group of children were being prepared for transport. Dr. Walsh supervised personally, checking each child's monitoring bracelet. Final transport departing in 3 minutes, announced a technician. Tunnel route confirmed clear. Ray's eyes met Mrs. Yang's in the darkness of the shaft. The moment of truth had arrived. No one noticed the alert on the security monitor, motion detected in ventilation system, section 5B. The technician who should have been watching had been pulled to assist with the evacuation. Below them, Noah suddenly looked up, directly at the ventilation grate, as if sensing their presence. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, the first real emotion he'd shown in 27 days. The ventilation shaft groaned under their combined weight. Mrs. Yang froze, but Ray kept moving, fingers working at the great fasteners with practiced precision. Below them, the final evacuation proceeded with clinical efficiency, children arranged in lines, researchers packing specialized equipment, security personnel checking communication devices. Noah stood with a last group of 6 children, his expression carefully vacant except for the occasional flicker of his eyes toward the ventilation shaft. Dr. Walsh moved through the room, inspecting each child's monitoring bracelet, murmuring instructions to her staff. "Primary assets secured for transport," she announced. "Secondary equipment follows in separate vehicles. Contingency measures active. Timing is critical, people." Ray worked the final fastener loose, easing the grate open a fraction to better assess the situation. 20 feet below, 3 armed security personnel guarded the children. 2 researchers managed computer terminals, presumably controlling the monitoring bracelets. Dr. Walsh supervised it all, periodically checking her watch. "How do we get to Noah?" Mrs. Yang whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Ray could answer, something unexpected happened. A child in the line, not Noah, but a small girl with tangled blonde hair, suddenly collapsed, convulsing violently on the floor. Staff rushed to her, monitors began beeping in alarm, and the ordered evacuation dissolved into momentary chaos. Noah immediately stepped back from his position, using the distraction to slip behind a stack of transport crates. No one noticed his absence in the commotion. "He's making a move," Ray whispered, understanding instantly. "The seizure is a diversion. They've planned this." Below, the researchers stabilized the girl while Dr. Walsh demanded explanations. What happened to her monitoring levels? This shouldn't be possible with the current dosage. As attention focused on the medical emergency, Noah reached beneath a workstation and retrieved something, a small device he'd assembled and hidden over weeks of careful preparation. He connected it to a terminal, while everyone's attention remained on the convulsing girl. Suddenly, every monitor in the facility began flashing red. Alarms blared. The overhead lights flickered and died, emergency illumination casting the warehouse in an eerie blue glow. "Now," Ray hissed, pushing the grate open completely. "The system's compromised." Officer Ortiz produced a rope from his tactical vest, securing it quickly. "I'll go first. Secure the area. Mrs. Yang, you follow. Ray stays until I signal." Ray shook his head frantically. No time. Look. Below them, the situation had devolved into barely controlled chaos. The monitoring bracelets on all the children had deactivated simultaneously, their LED displays dark. Several children were already moving, no longer displaying the drug compliance of moments earlier. Noah darted between equipment racks, helping others hide, while security personnel tried to regain control. Dr. Walsh shouted into her communication device, "Lockdown protocol. Repeat, initiate lockdown. We have a system breach." Metal shutters began descending over the exits. Whatever Noah had done to the system, it had triggered the facility's emergency protocols, trapping everyone inside. Ray made an instinctive decision, sliding through the open grate and dropping to a stack of crates below, using them to break his fall. Mrs. Yang called out in alarm, but Ortiz held her back, recognizing that Ray's impulsive action had actually created another diversion. Security personnel immediately spotted Ray, weapons drawn. "Don't move. Hands where we can see them." Ray raised his hands, his expression oddly calm despite the voices screaming in his head. "The collectors," he announced loudly, addressing the confused children. "I've been tracking them. You're not crazy. This is real, and you're leaving today." His words triggered a response. Children who had been frozen in confusion now moved with sudden purpose, scattering in different directions, making it impossible for the limited security team to contain them all. Dr. Walsh recognized Ray instantly from security briefings. "Simmons, how did you get in here?" She turned to her security team. "Contain him. He's the one who's been interfering with our operation." As guards converged on Ray, Ortiz seized the opportunity, lowering himself and Mrs. Yang to the ground in a more controlled descent on the opposite side of the room. In the confusion, they slipped behind equipment racks, working their way toward the last place they'd seen Noah. The boy had not been idle. The device he'd connected to the terminal, a crude but effective hack built from components stolen over weeks of careful observation, had done more than disable the monitoring system. It had activated the facility's fire suppression system, which now engaged with a deafening hiss. White chemical retardant sprayed from ceiling nozzles, further obscuring visibility and adding to the chaos. Through the artificial fog, Noah spotted his mother. Their eyes met across the distance, a moment of recognition that sent Mrs. Yang running toward him, regardless of danger or strategy. Noah rushed to meet her, colliding with her in an embrace that seemed to stop time amidst the chaos. "You came," he whispered, voice hoarse from disuse. "Always," she answered, clutching him with desperate strength. Their reunion was cut short as a security guard spotted them. Before he could raise his weapon, Officer Ortiz appeared behind him, neutralizing the threat with practiced efficiency. "We need to move," Ortiz urged. "There's an exit through the maintenance tunnels." Noah shook his head. "They'll be guarding it now. And the other children, we can't leave them." Across the room, Ray had become the focus of security's attention. Dr. Walsh approached him, remarkably composed despite the deteriorating situation. "Mr. Simmons, you've caused quite enough trouble," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "A man of your intelligence could have been an asset rather than an impediment." Ray laughed, a sound with edges of both clarity and madness. "You take children who see patterns, who notice what others miss. You steal their brilliance because you can't create your own. We identify exceptional cognitive abilities and nurture them in controlled environments," Walsh corrected. "These children will reshape the future of information analysis, predictive modeling, computational theory. Their gifts were being wasted in conventional settings." "You're harvesting their minds," Ray accused. "I've seen your research notes. Cognitive enhancement through controlled stress, neurocircuitry mapping. You're treating them like lab rats." As they spoke, Ortiz was coordinating with his team outside through his radio, voice low and urgent. The distraction team at the front entrance had engaged with facility security, creating a standoff that divided the remaining guards' attention. Noah tugged at his mother's hand, pointing to a control station. "I can override the lockdown, but I need a minute at that terminal." Mrs. Yang looked to Ortiz, who nodded. "Cover him." They moved carefully through the haze of fire suppressant, using equipment racks as cover. The other children, seeing Noah moving with purpose, began to rally around him. The girl who had faked the seizure, a tall boy who positioned himself as lookout, others forming a protective circle as Noah reached the terminal. Ray, meanwhile, had become the perfect distraction. His confrontation with Dr. Walsh had drawn the remaining security personnel toward the center of the facility. "You'll never contain this," Ray told Walsh. "Even if you stop me, there's evidence everywhere." "The blue backpack has been recovered," Walsh finished smoothly. "Your homeless delusions documented and discredited. Detective Morgan has already signed statements confirming you as the primary suspect in Noah's disappearance." Ray's face fell momentarily, then brightened with strange clarity. "You missed something. You always miss something. That's why you need the children who see patterns." At the control terminal, Noah's fingers flew across the keyboard, his exceptional mind navigating security protocols with intuitive understanding. The monitoring system that had suppressed his cognitive functions for weeks had been studying his capabilities even as it dulled them, and in doing so had inadvertently given him insight into its own operation. "Almost there," he muttered, as Mrs. Yang and Ortiz stood guard. Across the room, Dr. Walsh's patience with Ray had evaporated. Enough. Secure him for transport with the primary assets. His pattern recognition abilities, while untrained, could provide useful comparative data. As guards moved to restrain Ray, the overhead lights suddenly flashed back to full brightness. The lockdown shutters reversed direction, rising from exits. Facility-wide speakers crackled with Noah's voice. "Security protocol override accepted. Exterior doors unlocked. Emergency services notified. Facility data uploading to multiple cloud servers." Walsh's composure finally shattered. "Stop him. Lock down those terminals." But it was too late. Noah had not only unlocked the facility but initiated a complete data transfer, research notes, personnel files, security footage, all streaming to outside servers where they couldn't be erased or denied. The warehouse erupted into motion. Children ran for the now open exits. Security personnel, recognizing the collapsing situation, began prioritizing their own escape over containing the subjects. Researchers frantically attempted to shut down terminals, but Noah's hack had locked them out of their own systems. In the confusion, Ray broke free from the guards attempting to restrain him. He sprinted across the warehouse floor as gunfire erupted, Walsh's security making a last desperate attempt to regain control. Ray reached Noah, Mrs. Yang, and Ortiz as they headed for the nearest exit. "The evidence?" he gasped. "They said they found the backpack." "It doesn't matter anymore," Noah told him, grabbing his hand. "I've uploaded everything. Server logs, research protocols, subject profiles. It's all public now." They reached the exit as police sirens wailed in the distance, Ortiz's backup finally arriving in force. Outside, children scattered into the night, some finding Ortiz's officers who gathered them safely, others simply running from their captivity. As they emerged into the cold night air, a security guard appeared in the doorway behind them, weapon raised. Ray saw him first, shoving Noah and Mrs. Yang aside as the shot rang out. Ray staggered, red blooming across his chest. As he fell, the blue backpack, which he'd retrieved during the chaos, slipped from his shoulders, the lightning bolt catching the harsh security lights one final time. 6 weeks later, Noah stood at his bedroom window, watching spring rain trace patterns on the glass. The blue backpack with its lightning bolt hung on a hook nearby, scuffed, stained, but intact, like Noah himself. The investigation had sent shockwaves through the city. The Youth Cognitive Research Initiative had collapsed under federal investigation, its connections to government officials and private technology firms exposed. Walsh faced multiple charges, along with several researchers and security personnel. Detective Morgan had turned state's evidence, trading testimony for leniency. 28 children had been recovered from the facility, each beginning the long process of healing and reintegration. Noah's recovery progressed faster than most, his time in captivity shorter, his mind naturally resilient. Still, nightmares haunted him. The monitoring bracelet was gone, but sometimes he woke feeling its phantom weight. Mrs. Yang entered his room, carrying a weather journal, a new one, its pages blank and waiting. Noah nodded, grabbing his coat but leaving the blue backpack behind. Some artifacts of trauma were worth preserving, but not carrying daily. The psychiatric facility was bright and airy, nothing like the sterile warehouse where Noah had been held. In a sunlit common room, Ray Simmons sat by a window watching raindrops with the same intensity Noah often did. The bullet had collapsed his lung, but missed his heart by centimeters. The greater miracle, according to doctors, was that the trauma had somehow reset his neurochemistry, making his schizophrenia more responsive to treatment than it had been in years. "Noah," Ray greeted him, eyes clearer than they'd been during their ordeal. "Did you see the front moving in from the northwest? Barometric pressure dropped 6 millibars since morning." Noah smiled, settling across from him with the new journal. "I noticed. Classic spring system. I mapped the cloud formations during the drive here." For an hour, they tracked weather patterns together. Two minds that noticed what others missed, finding comfort in shared observation. Ray still struggled, moments of confusion interrupting his lucidity, occasional whispers making him pause mid-sentence, but he was present in a way that had eluded him for years. "The voices still talk to me," Ray confided quietly when Mrs. Yang stepped away. "But now I can tell which ones aren't real." "Mine were quieter in there," Noah admitted. "The medications made everything fuzzy, like watching weather through foggy glass." Ray nodded in understanding. "They wanted to control the storm inside you, but storms aren't meant to be controlled, just respected and understood." As they prepared to leave, Noah hesitated, then placed the weather journal in Ray's hands. "For your observations. I'll bring another next time." Outside, Officer Ortiz, recently promoted to detective, waited to drive them home. The case had transformed his career, though he often insisted he'd simply followed the evidence others had ignored. "How is he?" Ortiz asked as they walked to the car. "Better," Mrs. Yang replied. "The doctors say having purpose helps, tracking weather systems contributing to the investigation." Rain fell steadily as they drove through the city. Noah watched droplets race across the window, drawing patterns only he could see. The subway train rumbled past on elevated tracks, and Noah flinched slightly, a reaction that might never fully disappear. "Will you ever ride the subway again?" Ortiz asked gently, noticing his reaction. Noah considered the question, watching the city pass by. "Someday," he finally answered, "but I'll always watch the patterns." Like the lightning bolt on his backpack, some marks remained, evidence of storms weathered but not forgotten. And like Ray had taught him, sometimes the people others looked past were the ones who saw most clearly of all. That's the end of our story. I'm curious, what would you have done if you were Ray and discovered something no one else believed? Share your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Click to discover your next unforgettable journey.